Yeah, CHO'GALL is one of the sickest looking cards I've ever seen in Hearthstone. I freaking love this art. It looks like maybe Cthulhu's chilling in the background. This just insane void warped CHO'GALL. It's just freaking cool looking. Is the card freaking strong looking? I don't know. We're gonna talk about it alongside a bunch of other Warlock cards and some Priest cards in today's Cataclysm card review. So CHO'GALL Mastermind here is a new 9 mana 6/6 Colossal +2. It reads, your arms and soldiers destroy minions in the enemy's deck instead. And of course, you need to read the arms first to know what the heck that is referring to. They read, at the end of your turn, destroy the minion to the right to gain +2/+2. So basically here, you eat stuff to gain stats on your Cho's arms. Also remember, these can be upgraded via heralds. So they could be 4/4s at a base when fully upgraded. They go from 1/1 to 2/2 to 4/4. But then also those stats double as well. So that would be increases that go from +2/+2 to +4/+4, eventually to +8/+8. So actually, once they are fully upgraded, they would be 4/4s that gain 8/8, making them 12/12s. So you would be slamming a 9 mana 6/6 with 2 12/12s that eat minions from your opponent's deck. They don't like gain their stats or anything. They just destroy those minions in your opponent's deck. So kind of like a Ham the Hungry in Warrior, like Quest Warriors we know, but you know, multiples of those on board, gaining even more stats than Ham. And of course, CHO'GALL's there as well. Now, you know, normally, you know, this Cho's arm would destroy a CHO'GALL if it weren't for CHO'GALL's effect, right? Because CHO'GALL is to the right of the Cho's arm. Gall's arm would normally have something to the right of it. So that's fine when you play your CHO'GALL. Just do keep in mind that when you're playing the Herald cards and getting a soldier out of them, for instance, like with Shrine of Twilight, when you hit this location that heralds CHO'GALL, you're going to summon the Soldier of CHO'GALL. And if your CHO'GALL is not on board, then of course that could be destroying your own stuff, which you just need to be careful you don't have some awesome minion out to the right. You know, alternatively, you might have an egg or something out to the right that you're happy to destroy and give some stats to your Soldier of CHO'GALL, which it seems like an egg sort of deck is the kind of thing you'd want here for CHO'GALL, just because until you actually get to CHO'GALL, you're going to want to utilize this effect of destroying minions to the right. Just be mindful of positioning. Now, with CHO'GALL himself, of course, you can also use things like the Shrine of Twilight location here. It's one reason I flipped over to this one already, to get extra soldiers in play at the same time as your CHO'GALL. You would have 4 remaining spots on board. That could be 2 shrines that summon 2 soldiers, or theoretically, if you had like a soldier left over from a previous turn, you know, basically, I think you could get kind of 4 of these minion destructions out of CHO'GALL at once. So the question then just becomes, is the minion destruction and or the stat gain off all of these different things going to be a big enough play? That's where I'm hesitating. 9 mana is just awfully expensive, and although this does technically have a board impact, that impact is only via stats. Like it's going to be a giant pile of stats when fully upgraded, but it's not going to have taunt or rush or anything. It is just going to kind of be plopped down and sit there passively. Is that going to work out for you? Sometimes that might not be enough. Opponent's just like, yep, you're dead, actually. Sorry, dude. You just played all these crazy 30-30 in stats, but I don't care because you're dead. Or you played this 30-30 in stats, and I just use, you know, some big crazy board wipe and just wipe them, and we're back to square one. And like, yeah, I lost a few minions in my deck, but you can definitely lose minions in your deck and still win Hearthstone games, right? Sometimes you'll eat little garbage out of their deck and actually draw them closer to their big, awesome win conditions and threats. Sometimes you might eat a key card here or there, but most decks can afford to lose 1 or 2. You know, I guess the question is 4 like a critical mass, or it's going to be hard to actually get 4 all at once with CHO'GALL. Maybe is it only 2? Is 2 a critical mass where it's like that did enough? Ham the Hungry in Quest Warrior doesn't usually feel like it's hitting home runs, right? Most games, it just kind of felt like it didn't do much at all. I'd say most games for CHO'GALL, that's going to be true too, because you won't always have like the Shrine of Twilights feeding in extra minion destructions, because they just won't always line up. You won't have drawn them already. You know, you'll have already used them because you needed a herald or whatever, right? It's not perfect that you'll have 4 of these. I mean, I guess you could use them at the same time to herald CHO'GALL the turn you play him ahead of time. So maybe you could hold 1. But, you know, you just won't always have a ton. Maybe 3, 2.5 on average. Is that impactful enough in combination with the stats? I don't know. It's like suddenly I'm thinking to do that, for that to matter, you actually need a late game deck. You need a control deck, because CHO'GALL's so late in the game as a 9 cost play that you're going to have to actually build a pretty late game deck, which means the egg side of this, where you're like destroying your own things, or maybe it's not just eggs, but like death rattles or whatever. Suddenly it's like, well, what's that deck look like? So in essence, it's just feeling awkward to me. I don't know that there is some, you know, convergence here of utility and timing and deck construction where it's like, I'm like, yes, I see the lines for CHO'GALL. I'm actually just left with all these questions where it's like, yeah, no immediate impact, deck destruction. Like, yeah, you people hate Blackhorn. Is it actually that good? And I mean, honestly, Blackhorn just wiped out way more cards than something like CHO'GALL would as a comparison, right? So it's like, is there some magic convergence where the stats are enough, the effect is enough, the timing is quick enough? I don't know. I don't really see it. I think it's okay. I think you could definitely toss this into a late game Warlock deck and it's just like a big threat. But with Herald, you do have to commit a fair chunk of the deck to it. And it's like, well, I don't know, how many Herald cards do I really want to run to make my CHO'GALL worth it? Is he worth it on just his own? No, definitely not. You know, a 6/6 that summons a couple 3/3s that eats stuff out of the opponent's deck, not worth it. I think you have to herald this to be good. So it's like, if you can't tell, I really want to like this card. I love big, awesome, sick Warlock legendaries. I love the look of this card. I love the character CHO'GALL. Like, I am like smitten with everything about this card except for how powerful I think it's going to be. I just really wish this was a little bit cheaper, or, you know, I don't know, had some board impact. Just like, if this said it destroys minions on your opponent's board instead of in their deck, I'd be like, yes, A+, ship it, it's amazing. But I'm just stuck. I'm just like, it's hurting me basically to say that I just think this is okay at best. I really don't think it's gonna be great. So moving on to these Herald cards for CHO'GALL, we got 2 of them. Up first is Shrine of Twilight, a 4-mana location. This one draws you a card and heralds CHO'GALL, so that's going to summon you the Soldier of CHO'GALL, which we know is basically one of the arms of CHO'GALL. As a 4-mana play, boy, this is not good. I just want to be clear, like summoning a 1/1 that probably does nothing and drawing a card, that is not a 4-cost play. That is maybe not even really a 2-cost play. So just independently of anything else, this sucks. So the question then becomes like, can you build a deck again that like pays these soldiers off in a way that this starts to feel better? You know, do you have death rattles? Do you have egg cards? We already like saw an egg card printed in this expansion, I think, that would fit in here rather nicely. Like, can you make this feel like a higher tempo play? Of course, the challenge there is like you've already played the egg, which probably was a low tempo play. So you're kind of always playing catch up a little bit on board for ultimately just stats, where this now becomes like a 3/3 that maybe summons you something off of an egg, like another 4/4 or whatever. That feels like a little bit better of a 4-cost play, a 3/3 that draws you a card and activates in your deck, but you're still kind of playing from behind. So then the question is like, is it worth it the second time around? Because of course locations have future payoffs, right? You know, it's better. Maybe the soldier starts as a 2/2 at that point and you're feeling a little better and it becomes a 4/4. Like, that's still not really an impactful thing on turn 6. And then like destroying your own things on turn 6 is like, again, it just feels all a little awkward. We're going to see one more card in this video that does kind of play into this. Maybe I should just go ahead and show it so that it's clear. This is Cursed Chains, a 2-mana spell. This one allows you to take control of an enemy minion until the end of their turn. It can't attack, but it will be on the right side of your board, which means if you use Cursed Chains in combination with a Herald, you are probably going to be able to use that as a removal card for your opponent that also, of course, feeds your soldier, and it gains +2/+2. So, like, you know, it's sort of a 2-mana removal spell, but it's a hyper conditional one that's still like, you know, requiring more mana and more time and more cards. to only do something I think is like moderately good. You know, the removal is not exactly hard to find. In the mid game, you know, maybe that's killing some slightly bigger stuff, which is nice. In the late game, of course, could kill like Colossals or whatever, but it's still just, it's just kind of, just nothing about it feels like it's hyper efficient or quick or high tempo. It all just feels like you're just sort of slow and not really making big plays on board, not really reacting. Everything feels like it's about a mana too expensive to me. So in other words, I don't really think Shrine of Twilight here is a big boost to CHO'GALL. It just feels like another kind of anchor card that's holding it down, if anything else. So Shadowsworn Disciple is the next Herald card here for CHO'GALL. I do like this one a little better just because it's faster as a 2-mana card. It's only a 2/1. You get the Battlecry Herald CHO'GALL, which is going to summon you the soldier, and then Death Rattle, restore 3 health to your hero. So kind of a hint here, perhaps a little guide saying, hey, run Death Rattle cards with your soldiers because they're going to be eating your stuff, right? Maybe a soldier, a Shadowsworn Disciple gets kind of left over and on a future turn you summon another soldier and you kill your Shadowsworn Disciple and you gain 3 health. It's like, again, it's fine as a payoff. Like, you know, yeah, you're going to be taking so many hits because you're playing the game so slowly that 3 health will feel important, but wouldn't hurt to get some like minions or again, reactivity or immediacy. It all just feels kind of slow again, and like a 2/1 stat line, nothing super exciting about that. Like, would it really have killed this to be a 2/3, I wonder? I don't know. I mean, I guess that would have been, you know, fair number of bodies, but the Soldier of CHO'GALL is kind of risky to play in. So again, maybe a little better just because it's cheap and I like cheap heralds, all that's fine. But like, what does this deck look like? Is it an egg deck? Is it a Death Rattle deck? Is it a control deck? Because you got to get to turn 9 for CHO'GALL. He's not even really a control card. He's kind of a disruption card. And the questions just keep swirling. I want to like this so bad. I am trying to talk myself into this being good, and I just can't. I just don't think it looks very strong. All right, so next up here is that Cursed Chains, a 2-mana shadow spell. This one takes control of an enemy minion until the end of their turn, and then it can't attack this turn. So as we talked about, you know, some utility here with the soldiers and the CHO'GALL arms, where you use this as a removal card to pull it into your eating effect from your soldiers. I think that's okay at best. I think just like from a timing, conditionality, overhead standpoint, like you're going to want this card to have utility and impact outside of that, because that's just not always going to line up. And it does theoretically have that. This is kind of a freeze effect if you look at it, right? Because it's notably until the end of their turn. So they are not getting it back on your turn. They are getting it back at the end of their turn. So they will also lose an entire attack cycle with it, which again, effectively is like freezing it. On top of that, if it's actually a taunt minion by chance, then they would kind of be forced to kill off their own minion, which is sort of cruel, right? Like, no, that's mine. You must kill it for me. If they want to attack anyway, they could just wait and let it roll back over. So, you know, just this kind of stall that occasionally has some extra stall baked into it. Of course, soldiers and arms aren't the only way to eat stuff that you've stolen from your opponent. You know, this is not a good example because this is rotating, but Warlock historically has had cards like Eat the Imp, where they're able to sacrifice one of their own minions for some kind of powerful effect. You can imagine stealing something from your opponent and then eating it via Eat the Imp to draw 3 cards. That would feel like an incredible play. Again, it won't be exactly that because that's rotating, but that's the sort of idea. Even a card like Conflagrate, which is not rotating, I guess, this is much, much better if you have pulled the minion to your side because you now draw a card as opposed to the opponent drawing a card. But, you know, is that worth the 2-mana tax from Cursed Chain and the card cost? Debatably, I'm just saying those are the sorts of cards that might have extra payoffs here for Cursed Chain. So, I don't know. I think this is kind of interesting from a, you know, control Warlock standpoint, just the stall side of this, just the freeze side of it, the clunkiness from the opponent. There are definitely plays that this could make, and then, you know, maybe some bonus in the CHO'GALL world too, although I don't think that's a great use case necessarily, just certainly one that fits. So I do like that this card kind of extends beyond that. That gives me more hope for Cursed Chains here as just sort of an annoying control card. All right, next up here we have a little bit of a discard package coming into Warlock. This is 2-mana Disposable Acolytes Shadow Spell. When you play or discard this, summon 2 random 1-cost minions. So a little bit of a tempo enabler here. That's, you know, much better when you discard it, just getting some free bodies on board. It doesn't feel like the biggest payoff, honestly, right? You know, 2 random 1 costs could just be a couple 1/1s. We've seen that similar spell in Rogue that includes like the buff on them, which definitely seems to help. It makes them a lot more aggressive and threatening on board, whereas this can definitely have some moments where it just doesn't feel like you're putting out a ton of damage, you know, maybe 2-3 damage on average here from disposable acolytes. So, you know, I almost see this more interesting as like fuel for a discard deck. In other words, like it's nice to have enough stuff that's good to discard. So even if the payoff isn't super high, you know, just the discard side of it's better. Now, when you look at the discard pool in Warlock at the moment, it's not great. Let's be clear. And we're not actually going to see much right now, at least from Warlock for discard. We got the Bygone Doom Speaker. I mean, you know, discarding a random card, it's going to be hard to target this. But again, that's why sometimes just having the fuel is nice. Chrono Claws, almost definitely never going to discard this. This is, I think, ultimately a very strong card just because it pushes a lot of pressure, but just not good for disposable acolytes. Razadir, theoretically pretty nice again, but just random card. Doomguard again, you know, kind of nice, but very old school. Story of Lakari, actually terrible with this because it's going to fill the board anyway. So like this doesn't even make any sense with this. Also just crazy slow 7-cost card. So we also did see the neutral in this set, by the way, which we talked about, you know, if discard Warlock became a thing. It's almost like somebody had seen. It's almost like somebody has seen all the cards before the reviews. What a mystery. We saw this guy, the Gemstone Hoarder. Choose a card in your hand to discard. You know, we saw this guy, get it back, it costs 1 less. Like, that's pretty cool, honestly, as a 1-cost card. You feel better, like, tempoing this out. You know, you can create maybe a pretty high-pressure board, like your Gemstone Hoarder. You know, alongside 2 1-drops, turn 4, you got another cheap way to develop some 1-drops. You could see a bit of a tempo push happening there with the Gemstone Hoarder. I just don't think it's enough yet, basically. I think you still need a little bit more help. I guess Platasaur, I'm looking if there's other neutrals. There's a lot of non-Warlock here, but yeah, not a lot of tools. So it's like, can a mini set come along? Although, aren't they like doing something weird with mini sets, they said, or something? I don't know if they're doing something with like class sets or something. But anyway, can additional cards come along in future sets that give you more juice? Because I don't think this is going to be enough, and I don't think our next card, which is also discard themed, will help either. This is the Duke of Below, which I think is a very cool name, by the way. It is a 4-mana 2/2 with Rush, and it has +2/+2 for each card you've discarded this game. So, you know, for instance, going into turn 4, I don't think you'll have discarded very many cards based on the pool that's available so far. Platasaur could maybe help accelerate it a little bit, but in other words, I think this is very likely to be a 4/4, maybe a 6/6 occasionally. A 6/6 with Rush for 4 mana, definitely not a bad card. I just want to say that. Like, that's totally fine. That's certainly playable. I think it's just a question of, right now, how often does that happen? And really, I think, you know, how often can this get up to like 8/8 or 10/10 by turn 4 in a discard deck? That's where I might be more intrigued, where this is really a punchy, game-swinging threat that you need to power an entire deck. It would almost be too good and kind of scary, honestly. I'm not sure I want that to happen, but it might need to in order to be a competitively viable deck, because you just need some of those sort of win condition cards. If you're playing a tempo-y discard deck, you need stuff that really swings hard, puts opponents on the back foot, and can just carry you to victory. You know, that's the size it probably has to be in order to do that. And you just need those kinds of cards to make decks good. And I don't think this one's pushed quite enough. I feel like maybe if this was a 3/3 to start, it would already feel a little bit better, because you know, even just a 5/5 on turn 4 with Rush feels dramatically better than a 4/4. If this were a 4/4 at a base, then we'd really be cooking, right? But at a 2/2, it just does take a couple extra hits to start snowballing up. And I think right now there's just not enough hits. Instead, this is a card I think you're playing on like turn 6 or 7 as an 8/8, right? The way it looks right now, which still not terrible by any means. It's just not there yet. So that said, As if they, if they print a couple 1-cost discards, this thing suddenly gets broken really fast, right? So it's just one of those cards where, do I think this is any good right now? No, I don't actually think this is like a 2-star card today. 6 months from now, a year from now, or whatever, with more sets, if they print more discard support, could this easily be a 4-star card? For sure. And because I always review on, potential and characteristics of cards, not just immediate meta fit, then yeah, I'm actually going to give this 4 stars just because I think the threat is there. Just right now, no. This might never actually, come to fruition. It's almost scary that it would, but you give me a 1-cost and a 2-cost discard thing, and this comes down as an 8/8 on turn 4, we're talking about a nice card. So ultimately, high potential, perhaps low likelihood right now. So our final card here for Warlock is the Eldritch Tentacles. I just love all of these cards. The Lovecraftian old gods vibe of Warcraft has always really resonated with me, and these all just look so sick. Anyway, Eldritch Tentacles is a 6-cost shadow spell. A lot of these are shadow spells, by the way. That could be another angle to keep in mind too for these cards. Deal 3 damage to all minions, and then repeat this with 1 less damage. So potentially here, just a really nice board clear, chipping over multiple instances of damage. I think, putting out enough damage too that even as a 6-cost card, this actually lines up pretty well. There will certainly be boards where this feels absolutely worth it. It's also nice against those like Death Rattles and Reborns and stuff where there's sometimes sticky little annoying things left behind. So, it's in that sort of Defile space, that Lord Godfrey space, somewhere kind of in the middle actually. But I think numerically lines up. Control Warlock decks could love this. Rafam sort of decks could love this as just another way to stay alive, deal with problems. What I wish it was 5 mana, sure, but I think 6 is still just low enough to actually make a notable impact, because Warlock has other cheaper tools to keep up to. So yeah, I think this card is just a good, solid wide board removal. So now let's move over to Priest, kicking things off here with the Cleansing Cleric. This one has a pretty interesting this game style effect, which I think this game effects you always have to pay really close attention to. This is a 4-mana 4/5 Draenei. Battlecry, your healing effects restore 2 more health this game, which I think actually is pretty significant. We've already seen for Priest, you may remember some crazy guy really liked the Priest Legendary for some reason. The Priest Colossal that we saw. Where is this sucker? Let me find it. Why is it so hard to use this website when it's not in full screen? Oh my gosh. Let's pull up the Priest Colossal here real fast. I'm sorry, I should have prepared this ahead of time. I'm lazy. The Black Blood, you may recall, after you restore health to a character, attack a random enemy minion, and it's got these Black Blood's bodies that are each restoring 3 health to a random friendly character. Well, what if those went from restoring 3 health to restoring 7 health to a random damaged friendly character? That could heal you for a lot, could heal your Black Blood trading for a lot, and make that an even better stabilizer on board, which I already thought it was pretty decent anyway, dealing 3. Although perhaps sometimes we know things are coming down the pipe, maybe we knew this was happening. But, imagine it healing 5 or 7 and suddenly it's an even better onboard stabilizer. You might heal your face, theoretically for 21 off of the Black Blood. It's practically a Reno effect if you've weaved in a couple Cleansing Clerics. So, making your hero powers heal 6, suddenly sometimes a hero power face is gonna feel worth it against an aggro deck. That's gonna be an enormous stabilizer. The question becomes do you have time to play 2 Cleansing Clerics as 4-cost cards? Which is a fair question. I think that's a really reasonable ask, because it's just expensive enough that it's not super easy to weave in. 4 mana is big. Especially if you want 2 of them, you got to find moments for those. I will say, I think Priest as a class, Control Priests in particular, even something like an Imbue Priest, probably has, a little more leeway to spend mana on these sort of cards than other decks, because they have enough removal, they have enough healing, and they can take some hits if they know stuff like the Black Blood's going to be there to bring them back up and potentially, give them that time that they need. So I do think the windows will exist basically for Cleansing Cleric. Now, an entire separate thing we haven't even talked about here, which is definitely worth noting, is that we also saw some hints of Shadow Priest where you're dealing damage with your healing effects. Remember the Ruby Sanctum here. Your next healing effect this turn deals damage instead. So suddenly the Cleansing Cleric is not just perhaps a control tool that's, keeping you alive, could also be a lethal tool. It's kind of like saying, give your Ruby Sanctum spell damage +2 every time moving forward, or +4 if you've played multiples of these, or even more if you somehow generated extra copies, right? So suddenly, you have like a flash heal effect or whatever hitting face. Instead of going for 9, instead of hitting for 5, it's hitting for 9. It's suddenly like, hey, I got a Pyroblast here for 1 mana. So is there actually some combo deck that can use Ruby Sanctums in combination with Cleansing Clerics for just crazy pop-off burst damage, or could there be any other future Shadow Priest style effects too that turn damage, that kind of Auchenai Soul Priest style? So ultimately, I actually think this card's kind of cool in both directions. I think it's not obviously going to fit into every deck. You're going to have to really lean into this to make it worth it. Your deck's going to have to be able to afford that moment to play a 4/5. As we've talked about before, though, Elise, Xavius, there are times to play these cards as long as the payoff is worth it. And this is a pretty big payoff across not only like a hero power, but lots of different cards, some of which we're even going to see here in a second, that I think is going to make the kind of recovery from this tempo sacrifice a lot more viable than otherwise. So ultimately what I'm saying is I think this is pretty good. So next up here is Purifying Breath. This is a 2-mana fire spell. It deals 5 damage to a minion, and if it dies, you restore 5 health to the enemy hero. So this is, under normal circumstances, just a little removal card. Pretty cheap, deal 5 for 2. I think that's good. Just weave this in sometimes. Kill that Elise, kill whatever on board, kill your opponent's Cleansing Cleric. You get it, right? That has a downside of restoring 5 health to the enemy hero. Of course, most of the time, if you're just using this honestly as a removal tool, you're not going to care about that because maybe you're a control priest. You haven't even worried about their health total at all. They're still at 30. It effectively does nothing. So that's going to be the case. Zombie Chow style card, right? But sometimes, of course, as we just saw with that Ruby Sanctum, if you pop that Ruby Sanctum, this could be deal 5 damage to a minion to clear it out of the way. Then deal 9 damage to the enemy hero because you've got double Cleansing Cleric, makes your effects do more. Then you're turning those healing effects into damage, and it's deal 9, and it's like, man, okay, again, here is a little Pyroblast basically that's also clearing a taunt and letting me run some minions face, and it's like, boom, the opponent is dead because I'm turning all of this health into damage output, which I think is pretty cool, man. Like, I think this is a really high threat sort of thing. By the way, I am assuming this works. I think it should work based on the way these things have worked in the past. I think that's how it always worked with Auchenai Soul Priest and stuff. I don't know if we've had an effect exactly like this. Maybe somebody tell me it doesn't work, but I'm assuming it works. Whatever. Let's pretend it works. Surely it works, right? They must have designed this to work. Anyway, in other words, I like this card. Again, I think actually just fine on its own and does have some cool like bonus upside. So next up here is Mend. This is a 1-mana spell. Restore a minion to full health and draw a card, which I think is kind of a nice little like power word shield sometimes. I think a 1-mana flexible card draw like this that's occasionally going to have some nice impact on board is absolutely worth it. We're going to see a minion in this video that very specifically could benefit from Mend, kind of like the injured Blade Master style of old. I think that's sneaky good on its own. Again, though, actually with Ruby Sanctum, remember this can be just like guaranteed minion removal. 20 health minion on board, Mend is still going to wipe it out with Ruby Sanctum because it's going to restore 20 health to that minion. I think, again, that's how that works based on some... I don't even remember what interaction it is, but I think there was some interaction in the past with a similar sort of effect, and that's exactly how it works. So maybe making a bad assumption, feel free to argue in the comments, check my logic, whatever, obviously. I think that's how it works. So I think this could be a Ruby Sanctum removal card in some cases, but it doesn't even need to be because I think other times it's probably just a fine power word shield card in many cases for a lot of decks, particularly with all this like health buff stuff Priest has had. You kind of have some leftover damage minions on board often, where this is like worth 5 health on board, kind of even better than a power word shield sometimes, of course worse against a high health thing. Full health thing, but still just a little cycle for Priest seems good. So next up here, speaking of things being at full health, this is the Incensed Matriarch, a 4-mana 3/3 dragon that reads, at the end of your turn, if this is at full health, gain 3 health. So when you play this under normal circumstances, it's a 3/6 because it's buffed itself. And then, you know, theoretically, it survives on board, you heal it up again, you know, maybe it goes to like 3/9 or whatever. Of course, also there's all this health buff stuff. At the end of the day, though, the problem for this card is just like, why? You know, why do I want to play a 3/6 basically on turn 4? That's just not very good. Even in like dragon decks, I don't think that's very good as a dragon. The health scaling here isn't either like so dramatic that it's like I'm thinking about inner fire stuff. Anything like that doesn't jump out at me either as a big threat for this one. You know, flipping the because it's not like scaling its health that much. It's just +3 extra. So like, why not just run an already big card that has a useful effect? And then if you're going to be adding health to it anyway via all the health buffs or whatever, you know, just start with a better base. Like, yeah, the extra 3 is really not going to be a big difference. So like, I just don't know what the point of this card is. Like, I don't know why I'm running this. Who cares about it? How is the health better than just, you know, a big 4-drop that has effects that are good and still buff their health and still have all that upside? So yeah, it's just like, what's this doing? It doesn't have a reason to be in your deck. I don't see why anybody's running this card. And the next up here is the Injured Attendant. This is a 3-mana 3/8 undead with lifesteal, and Battlecry deal 4 damage to this minion. So basically, this is going to come down as a 3/4, but also one that heals you because of this lifesteal and the fact that this is dealing damage. It's a 3/4 that heals you for 4, but then also, of course, can actually heal you more on board as this starts to take trades, which I think is pretty sweet, actually. I think that's cool, man. Like, this is just another good little speed bump card to play into faster, aggressive decks that potentially heals you like 6 or more in many cases, that also has some upsides for stuff like Mend, like we were just looking at, right? Mend on this is absolutely nuts because now you've got a 4 or 3/8 with lifesteal that's really hard for opponents to deal with potentially, right? And you're drawing a card on top of it. You can also buff the health of this with all the various health buff stuff we got from Priest in the last set. So I think this is actually like sneaky good little guy that plays really well in a lot of these game plans. I also haven't acknowledged this, but I think lifesteal should work with Cleansing Cleric. I think it counts as a healing effect, so I think this might actually heal you for like 5 or 7 if you've played Cleansing Clerics first. Again, please feel free to check my logic on that in the comments. I can't say with 100% certainty, but it feels to me like this just, you know, a pretty solid body that's like a lot of life gain, which is pretty nice sometimes. You may not always want to play it on turn 3, but even on like turn 4 with Mend, even late in the game, it's still just, you know, that immediate heal, which is nice. If you gave this taunt, it'd be even better. So pretty sneaky good little card. So then our final card here is Schism. This is Priest's Shatter card. Are these all 4 mana? Were they like, did they say that they were just all going to be 4? They've all been 4 so far, I think. 4 mana Shadow spell, Shatter. So again, reminder on that keyword. That means when this enters your hand, it's going to split in 2 and move itself to each end of your hand as 2 independent cards, one of which will say give a friendly minion +2/+3 and elusive. The other will say summon a copy of it. Which will actually, that's kind of a weird text line now that I think about it when it's on its own. Surely it must say summon a copy of a friendly minion. Probably does. But anyway, once all the cards in between them have been played or lost, they will fuse back together in hand and you'll get this guy, which, you know, summoning a copy of stuff is very cool for the record. I like summoning copies of big scary things. The fact that they have buffs is also awesome. There were like priest decks doing this sort of thing in the past as well with like separate cards in some of those days. So it's all fine. I just like the Shatter side of it again, man. It's like, it's just, you got to have a pretty fast deck to make this worth it, I think, because like otherwise the Shatter is just going to get stuck for way too long. Each side of this independently, by the way, sucks, to be very clear. I mean, summon a copy of it for 4 is maybe okay depending on the scenario and the deck. If you had like a big enough threat, you know, that somehow stuck behind or whatever, like sure, there are moments that's possible. This should only summon copies of friendly minions, so you can't like steal stuff from your opponent or whatever. It's probably okay, but the other one's just, you know, 2/2/3 and elusive is garbage for 4 mana. So you kind of have to shatter them to feel really good. I think Shatter's going to work best in like fast decks. So can you build like a tempo-y minion-based deck that's playing out a lot of stuff quickly that still has a good enough payoff when buffing and giving something elusive? Like, is there a nice threat on board where you're like keeping it alive, protecting it, and you're just kind of swarming opponents down? I'm not going to say it's impossible because Priest has had some of those kind of buff decks in the past, you know, Inner Fire style stuff where this sort of package has worked well. I don't really see that lining up as well in modern day Hearthstone, or certainly not based on the card pool we have available right now. And I think ultimately the Shatter is still going to be kind of clunky and awkward, even in a deck like that. Sometimes it's just not going to be there when you need it, just because, you know, sometimes you have a random 5-cost card, 4-cost card that gets stuck in the middle, and it's just like everything falls apart. So yeah, I just don't really see this one coming together all that often, I'm sad to say. And that joke wraps it up for me. I'm now retired, but it also wraps it up for this review. So now let's go ahead and rate these cards from 1 to 5 stars. CHO'GALL Mastermind is a 3-star card, and that's honestly me being generous because I like him so much. Shrine of Twilight is a 2-star card. Shadowsworn Disciple is a 3-star card. Cursed Chains is a 4-star card. Disposable Acolytes is a 3-star card. Duke of Below is a 4-star card. Eldritch Tentacles is a 4-star card. Cleansing Cleric is a 4-star card. Purifying Breath is a 4-star card. Mend is a 4-star card. Incensed Matriarch is a 1-star card. Injured Attendant is a 4-star card. Schism is a 2-star card. And yeah, there you go. Bit of a mixed bag today, right? I think some things with potential. CHO'GALL's really probably honestly a 2-star card. I just could not bring myself to do it. I just like I just couldn't do it. I like him too much. I have to give him 3. But I think this Priest stuff is kind of promising. You know, I do sometimes have a tendency to overestimate the impact of like survivability and control decks, I'll be honest, but I just really, really want them to succeed. So I'm hopeful that I'm right, but also this does have that potential as, you know, a Shadow Priest kind of enabler, which anyway, I think it does if it works like I think. So, you know, that might be the boost that really gets that card there. But ultimately, some pretty sweet cards, some pretty cool flavor, and some neat designs regardless of impact here. So all in all, share your thoughts on these cards down below. Thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.